difficulty, I imagine, in this situation was trying to be true to the people that suffered it, and
Yeah.
I wondered how you approached that.
Well, I think that's absolutely how you approach something like this. If you're going to make a movie about a disaster that happened where many people lost their lives and many people lost their loved ones, you have to do that with great responsibility and respect. And so we did. We approached every scene like that. I think every scene that comes from the real family's experience. You know, they spent many days or weeks working with the writer, and
You didn't get to meet the guy?
until we were shooting out there. That's right.
Uh-huh.
That's right. Because I was shooting salmon fishing in the Yemen right up until we had to go before. You know.
That must have been a very strange juxtaposition.
I know. I was getting emails and texts from Hota and from Naomi from the set, you know, when they were shooting in Alicante in Spain, and but I think that's the truth. That's whenever anything felt, when it felt like if ever the movie making felt like it was leading the story instead of the other way around, then we would discuss it. I would always talk to Juan Antonio about it and say, you know, there was a sequence where I was coming through the wreckage, the devastated area, and there was a staircase that was leading to a building that disappeared. So it was just a staircase leading to nowhere, and I had to go up the staircase and then shout Maria, and the camera swept up on a crane, and it felt too heroic and like a movie to me. And as we were looking at it in the monitor, I said, I think it's too much. It doesn't feel right. And we would always, it doesn't appear in the film, and we do, not because I said so, but I think because it didn't feel right. And I think he did a good job at that, I think.
Well, that scene where there is a scene where you're screaming. You did a lot of screaming, and I felt for you there that your voice was hoarse, and how you must have had to really go at it to get that quality, to do it over and over and over.
There was a lot of screaming. I think there was a lot of raw, emotional behaviour there, and not a great deal of analytical behaviour. All the survivors that I met and spoke to have no recollection of time or distance. There was a woman in London I spoke to who lost her husband there, who she sadly found his body in a temple some days later. But she talks about she went back to visit some years later, and the distance that she remembered being from where she'd left her children in safety to when she found the body she remembered like 20 miles or something. And in actual fact, it was around the corner. And so there was so I think people were in such shock and operating in this purely emotional sort of way, raw way.
So you had to actually shoot in a. I was hoping all of this was VFX, but it appears to have been real water that you were working in. How awful!
I didn't have to. I'm not really.
Not so much.
Because you don't see me you see me being hit by the water, and then you see me in the aftermath of the wave. It was
more
Naomi and Tom who spent working with water is so difficult. It's an inordinately difficult thing to do. And I just heard just now for the first time that they worked in a huge tank in Alicante in the southeast of Spain, and because the nature of shooting in the water and resetting the water, and there were people on towers throwing in debris, and they were on a track that pulled them across the tank and through the water. It took hours to reset each take, and so they were getting maybe 3 or 4 shots a day, really not very much. So it took them 4 or 5 weeks to shoot that initial sequence, which is a long time.
Have to run around barefoot in what looked like rather treacherous
terrain. I know. Well, bless the art department, because before each take there was an army of people, you know, on their hands and knees up to their elbows in mud, checking there wasn't anything sharp. And they made me some little prosthetic like slippers almost that looked like feet. So in the wide shot, I've got little covers on my feet.
I'm happy to hear that. That makes me feel much better. I wouldn't want you to have to worry about that.
Yeah.
So the comparison that I would love to ask you to make, working with Bayona and someone like Polanski. I mean, how would you define the difference between one director and the other?
Well, I never do. I mean, I would never do that. I mean, I don't personally compare them, on set or anything, or in my. Every director is very different from the last.
Let's just ask about. Yeah, go
ahead. The wonderful thing about directors is that it is directing, and the relationship between an actor and a director is that being a great director is very much about your technical skills and your your artistic use of the camera, or whatever. But it's very, very much about your character and who you are, and how you respond to what you see and the other people around you. And so that's always unique and different. And Polanski is completely different from every other director I've worked with.
Well, let's just talk about him.
Yeah, about
because that was my favorite of your movies, your recent movies.
Yeah.
It was superb.
Oh, good, thank you.
And I wondered what he, how he worked with you, and what it was like to work with him. Mm-hmm. He's such an imp. He can be such a charismatic, crazy, charming, and often frightening man. I've met him, and I just wondered what your experience with him was like.
Well, I mean, amazing, because he's the most extraordinary director. But
how?
Because he has such an absolute passion for you doing things exactly as you would do them, for finding the truth of a moment, really. And he doesn't care how long it takes. I just think naturally over the years you build up a sort of sense that you should do things quickly, because there's usually a continuity woman sitting behind the director going, that was 45 seconds, and the director goes, okay, could you make it a bit quicker? And after a while you end up just acting quickly because you think you should. But Polanski's the opposite of that. He's like, why would you do it like this? Take your time, and you slow down, and he wants everything to feel real, and he has a real absolute sense of the film that he wants to make before you get on set. And he, down to the minutest detail. He's just very, very thorough.
He would take many takes then?
No, he would take his time. He would start, you'd always rehearse the Polanski in the trailer first, in a new location or with a new actor. Because I was there all the time, and then, Tom Wilkinson came out for a bit, and Olivia Williams came out for a bit, and Pierce Brosnan. So whenever there was a new actor or a new location, you would go to his trailer first, and you start rehearsing in there, really. You start reading through the scene. He's very picky. He's very picky about everything. And then through that process, and then you go on set, and you start rehearsing it on set, and he's still very picky about every line, about every moment, every detail. And then when you start to shoot, his hands come off, if you like, and he lets you go. And then you feel that then you know what he and I was lucky because I was with him every day, so I got a very strong sense of what he wanted and it became quite seamless with me after a while, and me and him, our relationship, I liked it.
So indulge me if we were to ask about Soderbergh.
Yeah.
And the way it worked with him on
Yeah.
Haywire, where you were a delicious villain.
Oh, thank you.
What was his process?
Well, his process is he's the only director I've ever worked with who shoots and lights. So he's
his own cameraman.
Yeah, and his own lighting man. So a DP. So he sits at the camera, and he lights the set, and you rehearse, you block it, rehearse it thoroughly. There's some discussion beforehand, but most of the work happens on set, and then, in that scene in that film we had scenes with many people. Like in the end in the house, there was many characters. So we would block it until we were all happy with the shape of the scene, and then there was a flurry of activity as people ran around and put marks on the floor and marked where the camera was going to be and where the actors are going to be, and within 5 minutes he mapped out the whole shooting, and then we just went, put the camera there, put the camera there, put the camera there, put the camera there, and he's very hands off in a way. Sometimes we did stuff very quickly because he wanted the sun, just setting behind us in the house. And so everything's shooting that way. We did like quick take after take, and then when we turned around, we had more time. It felt, but he doesn't give you very many notes really. And I felt with him that you maybe do usually around about 7 or 8 takes, and somewhere around about the 6th or 7th take, without getting very much from him, something would shift. And I think that's just with all of the actors going, okay, naturally something happens. And when the scene shifted, it seemed to be that that's what he was waiting for to happen. And then he would go, okay, we've got it, we move on. And I was thinking, oh, he was just waiting for that thing to change, and it did, but he didn't really ask for it, didn't force it.